Meeting to order, special city council meeting, February 21st, 2012. Roll call.
Councilmember Graham Mejia. Here. Councilmember Kusamoto.
Here.
Councilmember Stevens.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Poe.
Present.
Mayor Edgar.
Here. Next up, oral communications. At this time, any individual in the audience would like to come forward to speak on any item on the agenda. Remarks should be limited to no more than 5 minutes. Anybody in the audience? Seeing none, we're going to move on now to special orders of the day. For a mid-year budget review for fiscal year 2011 and 12. Angie.
Good evening, everyone. I'm going to turn it right over to Anita Agramonte, Finance Director, and we have a PowerPoint tonight and, of course, a lot of materials to go with that. So take it away.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Pleasure to be here this evening to go over the mid-year budget review. The presentation is about 30 to 45 minutes long, and please feel free to interrupt me at any point with questions, clarifications.
Mayor, if we could hold the questions to the end so we can get through it unless there's something pertinent. If we could do that, that would be.
Okay.
We just seem to get off track sometimes when we do that.
Okay. Okay, with that, the agenda for the evening, we'll start off with going over fiscal year 10-11, a brief recap. Moving along to a brief economic update, then the current fiscal year 11-12 outlook, recommended budget amendments, and we'll close with a summary of staff recommendations. To start off, for fiscal year 10-11, general fund revenues. Fiscal year 10-11, the city benefited from sizable increases in several revenue categories, the largest being charges for services, in which the Recreation and Community Services staff did an outstanding job with such programs as Race on the Base, 4th of July, as well as their ongoing programs, activities, classes, and so forth. Fines and forfeitures, we also saw, also came in over budget by over $100,000. Just about every line item in this category exceeded the budget. There were also some unanticipated bail bond forfeitures that are very infrequent occurrence. Miscellaneous revenues came in over $100,000 over budget as well, and these are basically one-time revenues such as the sale of the street sweeper, insurance refunds, damages to city property, things like that. A few categories came in under budget, notably the utility users tax came in $42,000 budget under budget, and that is because of the telephones tax line item. At the bottom, the transfers in and adjustments, those are basic year-end audit adjustments that happened last year. Moving on to general fund expenditures, most departments last year saw savings, quite sizable savings. The finance department, finance director position was vacant. In the police department, they were actually down 2 officers, 1 vacant and 1 on leave. Community development, the planner position was vacant most of the year. Public works saw a slight increase, actually. They went over budget just a little bit due to increased utility costs. Recreation was also slightly under budget, part-time salary savings there, and the insurance line item saw savings in the city's workers' comp rates, as well as a reduction in claims last year. Putting it together, the city ended fiscal year 10-11 with a almost $1.2 million surplus. That surplus was largely due to several one-time revenues, as well as over $500,000 in departmental savings. Putting that together in a graph, this is how the city has performed comparing revenues to expenditures over the last 6 years. The spike in 07-08 was, this was the first year that, several things happened that year. The police department went to the 3% at 50 retirement formula. This is the year that we put aside money for the purchase of the finance software. Let's see, back in 05-06, the reason the expenditures were so high that year, that's the year that we purchased Laurel Park And then if we look towards the right-hand side of the graph, 10-11, we're actually seeing revenues a lot higher than expenditures. And that is the almost $1.2 million surplus that we saw that year. Okay, so how does all that impact our fund balances? Over the last several years, we've had steady increases in fund balance. And last year, we see a rather dramatic increase in fund balance, and this is due to the $1.2 million surplus. Okay, an economic update. Economists forecast that the current recession has bottomed out. However, recovery is very slow to follow. The stock market is up, Dow Jones above 12,000 points. However, EDD figures show that unemployment rate still remains high, with 7.8% in Orange County and 11.8% in LA County as of December. Additionally, the current year, actually, 11-12, is shaping up to be strong in sales tax. We've seen increases statewide, growth statewide over 8%. However, this pace is projected to slow down for the next year. The housing market's still unstable. Median prices in Orange County have dropped to the 400,000 level, which is the equivalent of those in 2003. Orange County net assessed valuations were up in 2011 by just under 1%. However, our city assessed valuations were down by less than 1%, 0.7%, due to several reassessments within the city. So basically, to sum it up, economic recovery is projected to continue, however, at a slow pace, and revenues are projected to continue to remain flat for the next several years. Okay, moving forward into fiscal year 11-12, the current year. A snapshot of the current year's budget and projections show that we started the year with a adopted budget, started out with a $36,000 operating surplus. However, the overall budget projected a deficit, and this is because of the capital outlay projected for the general plan, the city's general plan, which was originally intended to come out of reserves. However, current projections show that the year is projected to end the operating portion of the budget with $175,000 operating surplus, and including the capital outlay, net operating surplus of $25,000. And the next slides will show the detail of how we arrived at these projections. Okay, so to compile the figures for this year, staff has carefully examined prior year's figures as well as this year to date performance in all revenues and expenditures. And this represents the general fund projected revenues for the year. These will be, the variances in this slide will be discussed in more detail in the next slides. Overall, the city is projected to end the year with a $60,000 revenue shortfall. And we'll go over each of these in detail in the next slides. General fund revenues. This is a pie chart representing where the city gets our funding. The top three categories are property tax at 26%, sales tax at 21%, and utility tax at 20%. So those make up over 60% of our budget, with the rest making up the rest. The property tax breakdown. For every dollar of property tax collected in the city of Los Alamitos, the city receives 10 cents. So only 1/10 of the property tax collected in town actually comes to the city. This graph illustrates our property tax performance over the last 6 years. The highest here was fiscal year 2009-10, and since then we've seen a small decline. Projected for the current fiscal year, a 0.7% decrease, and this is due to Prop 8 adjustments in the commercial sector, as well as a decline in unsecured property values. Okay, moving on to sales tax. The distribution of the 7.75 sales tax rate here within the city receives 1 cent of that, whereas 6 cents go to the state general fund. So our 1 cent represents 13% of the sales tax collected here in Los Alamitos. A 6-year trend for our sales tax revenues. The peak was back in fiscal year 07-08. From 07-08 to 09-10, we took a 30% decline in this revenue. Since 09-10, last fiscal year, growth of 8.2% was realized, and this current year, we're projecting additional further growth of 7.9%. Okay, utility taxes have remained flat basically over the last 6 years. This year, the budget was $2.15 million. At this time, we're projecting to end right on target in this category. There are some variances within water rates went up, so therefore there's a little bit more in that area. However, gas is down, but overall the category is projected to end right on budget. Franchise fees. This area, we're seeing a slight increase, and that is due to cable rates. We believe some of it is attributed to FiOS coming in, as well as the increase in water rates. Okay. Moving on to fines and forfeitures. The 6-year trend here shows that the current year will be a decline, and that is an anticipated shortfall due to red light camera receipts. To better illustrate what's going on with this category, photo enforcement, we have a budget of $350,000. However, we're only projecting to receive $250,000 this current year based on what we've got to date. However, the expenditures for the program are only $193,000. Looking at the other 2 categories, moving violations and parking fines, those 2 are projected to be right on budget. There was the variance in fiscal year 10-11 is attributed to the bail bond forfeitures that I mentioned that were basically a one-time or very random occurrence. Okay, other general fund revenue variances. The transient occupancy tax is projected to exceed the budget by $6,000. Licenses and permits, $18,000 shortfall, which is offset by corresponding expenditures or budget savings in the Community Development Department. This is due to planning permits. Okay, intergovernmental, $38,900 shortfall, and this is mainly attributed to the loss of VLF funding. This is this was legislatively taken away from cities this year. Charges for services, $9,000 shortfall this year, and this is due to NPDS permits. We're seeing decreases in this line item. Recreation services, $24,000 increase projected, and that's keeping in line with last fiscal year, and due to Race on the Base and their great performance in that department. Interest earnings, $15,000 decrease is projected, and that our interest rate with LACC is down. It's at 0.36%, which is about half of what it was at the end of last fiscal year. And miscellaneous revenues, $100,000 increase is projected in this category, and this is due to a one-time workers' compensation insurance refund, which is actually offset by expenditures in the insurance category. Okay. Moving on to general fund expenditures. Most departments are again projecting to have savings this fiscal year. The operating budget started out with $11.3 million, and it's projected to end at $11.2 million, giving us $100,000 in projected savings for the fiscal year. To provide additional details, the following slides will show that. The pie chart shows how our general fund expenditures are divided out, and there's no surprise here that the police department comes in at 45%, followed by public works and recreation at 14%, and administration with 12%, and administration includes the city council, the city manager, city clerk, and finance and administrative services. Departmental savings are projected in finance, $20,000 from the animal control contract, an additional $10,000 in salary savings. In the police department, we have one officer on leave, which gives us an additional $100,000 in savings. The community development department is projecting $60,000 in salary savings, as well as $25,000 in the NPDES contract services line item. A couple areas in need of additional funding in the public works department: utility costs for water in the Parks Maintenance Division will require an additional $15,000 this year. And the insurance, which I just mentioned on the revenue side, the additional $100,000 is needed to fund a workers' compensation claim, which is fully offset by the reimbursement from the excess insurance carrier. Then we have an interdepartmental transfer, which is for the approved reorganization of the recreation and city managers divisions, which funded the assistant to the city manager position. That necessitates a $39,033 transfer from the recreation department to the city manager department. Okay, so again, putting it all together, we're projecting a $60,000 revenue shortfall, a $100,000 departmental expenditure savings. So with that, the general fund is projected to end the year with $25,000 surplus. The impact on the fund balance, we will see an increase in a $25,000 increase in fund balance. And with that, the city has 66% coverage of revenues to expenditures. And a fund balance for the general fund budgeted, projected at $7.4 million. And that concludes the general fund portion of the presentation. Moving on to the city's other funds, we have 10 special revenue funds, 1 debt service fund, 5 capital project funds, and the 2 internal service funds. And the next slides will cover variances projected within these funds. The Public Safety Augmentation Fund and the Measure M Fund, these both are sales tax driven. So with sales tax increasing, we're projecting to see increases in both of these funds. The Public Safety Augmentation Fund ended fiscal year 10-11 $8,000 higher than the original estimate. This funding is used to offset the cost of police services, so this funding is transferred to the general fund. The CDBG fund, revenues are reimbursed upon project completion. So the last fiscal year's project, the 10-11 funding, was received in fiscal year 11-12. So we need to add that to the current year's revenue budget. Measure M funding, again, is sales tax driven. So we're projecting that source to exceed the budget by $23,000. The Los Alamitos TV fund is projected to end the year $2,800 below budget, and then this is due to the loss of funding for broadcasting Rossmore meetings. And the Office of Traffic Safety Fund is projected to end the year with a $3,000 surplus due to vehicle impound fees. Okay. Changes in or variances in capital projects and additional carryovers. The Civic Center Energy Efficiency Upgrades Project. This was funded through the EECBG grant fund, which was originally budgeted in fiscal year 10-11. A $22,683 carryover is requested at this time to complete the project in the current fiscal year. The residential street improvement projects, it was budgeted in the current year, and it's projected to be 50% complete by the end of the fiscal year, leaving $185,000 to be carried over into fiscal year 12-13. The Catella Medians at Chestnut project. This was incorporated into the business area street improvement project, which the business area street improvement project is projected to be 2/3 completed by the end of the fiscal year, leaving $110,000 to be carried over into 12-13. The Coyote Creek improvement project, the city has applied for an extension on this project, and if approved, it's projected to be continued to next fiscal year as well. Additional capital equipment requirements, vehicle replacement. We have a vehicle in the police administration division, which currently exceeds 140,000 mileage on the odometer, and it's presenting some maintenance issues. So therefore, at this time, staff recommends that it be bumped up for replacement sooner rather than later. Okay, internal service funds. The city has 2 internal service funds, and the garage fund being the first. This fund accounts for the city's fleet maintenance and replacement. Departments are taxed annually for fleet operations and maintenance. The fund balance is used for vehicle replacement. A fund balance of $462,000 is projected for the end of the current fiscal year. And based on preliminary staff calculations, which is this handout that I've included, according to this calculation, $742,000 would be recommended for the fund balance reserve of this fund. Staff is currently working on a comprehensive vehicle replacement policy to be presented to council for discussion and consideration at an upcoming meeting. The internal services, the next internal services fund is the technology fund, and this fund accounts for the city's IT needs. Departments, again, are taxed annually for operations and maintenance. The fund balance is set aside for the city's future technology requirements, which include a phone system, the 800 megahertz upgrade for the police department, Wi-Fi for the Civic Center, digital evidence for the police department, ongoing computer replacement. This is just to name a few of the things that this funding is potentially reserved for. And the city's technology steering committee is working with our IT consultant to develop an IT strategic plan that, again, will be coming before the city council for consideration and approval. With that, our recommendations for the general fund, again, include the decrease of general fund budgeted revenues by $60,000, an increase in general fund expenditures of $115,000, the transfer of $39,033 from the Recreation Department to the City Manager Department, and recommendations for the city's other funds: increase the CDBG grant revenue by $137,000, increase the Public Safety Augmentation Fund revenue budget by $11,000, and transfer the balance of the fund, the $19,000, to the general fund for police services. Increase the Measure M revenue budget by $23,000, decrease the Los Alamitos Television Fund by $2,800, increase the Office of Traffic Safety Fund revenue budget by $3,000, increase the EECBG revenue and expenditure budget by $22,000, and increase the Garage Fund expenditure budget by $29,500. So in closing, with these recommendations, it's projected that the city will end the year with a $25,000 general fund surplus. And with that, be glad to take any questions.
Okay, I'm going to bring it back. And wow, what a bunch of bank shots to hit 25,000 surplus. But that was good. There's a lot here, and I've had the opportunity to go through this in some detail before to be able to be prepared so that we didn't have to have this go on forever. Let me go ahead and open it up and see if any of the other council members have questions before I get to some further questions. Jerry, do you have anything up front?
Not right now.
Okay. Ken.
You know, on the fiscal year 10-11 recap, you had mentioned that the telephone tax was down. And how does Verizon or Fios fit into that?
We see that on the franchise fees.
Okay.
So that's actually been up. But that's a franchise fee, it's not a phone service.
All right.
So it's not, basically it's not a UUT. It comes through as a
Okay.
franchise. So we've seen an increase on that side, but a decrease on this side.
All right. So it is balancing out then? Good. That was my only concern on that one. We had indicated on economic update that we have an 8% growth statewide. Have we been able to narrow down what part of the economy that sales tax is coming from on the 8% growth?
It's a mix.
Is
It's a
it?
mix, yeah. A lot of it has to do with gas tax, gasoline
tax.
prices going up. We've seen a lot in that category. But for us, it's a mix. It's a little bit here, a little bit there.
Is it sustainable through the year 2012, do you think? Is it constantly going up again statewide?
Current year-to-date receipts show a consistent increase, yes.
Very good. You did give us a great deal of information, and I've made notes on quite a few all the pages. I'm just trying to figure out the best ones to go to. Red flex cameras. Revenue is going down on those, and it's still cost neutral.
Yes.
How effective are they? Have we, I don't know, Chief, I don't mean to catch you off guard on this, but is it a deterrent, or are we kidding ourselves on these things?
Well, when we think about when we put the red light cameras in 2005, and we saw the decrease over the years, about 50% from when we started till now. So I guess one way you can measure that effectiveness is we know that there are far less people running that red light today than there were 5 years ago.
Hence, 50% fewer tickets or accidents. If it's fewer accidents, wow, leave them in there, you know?
Yeah, it's hard to say because I guess our sample size of broadside intersection collisions might not really give us a lot of detail as far as how much they have reduced accidents. But we do know that they've reduced violations, and it only takes one to bring us catastrophic results.
Good, and that's pretty much the answer that I was hoping for then. It's something that is a deterrent, and it seems to be working then. All right, without going through a bunch of other things, I'm going to pass it on to the next person.
All right, Marilyn.
Okay, a couple of the things you've already asked have already been answered. I did note that one of the in the staff report that as far as sales tax is increased, and a substantial amount of that is the $75,000 guarantee from the trash contract. And I think that knowing that no other city has that that's of note. I would also like to ask about the LATV and the Rossmore meetings. I know that Has there been some negotiation or so on? Where are we with that?
Negotiations haven't taken place yet, but the exact where we are now is that the County of Orange franchise agreement with Time Warner is expiring in March.
Okay.
And so that governs we get a portion of revenue every month. It's about $1,450 a month to show the Rossmore meetings on LATV.
Right.
So we're the fund, not the general fund, but
Right.
the LATV
LATV
fund
Uh-huh.
stands to lose about $14,500 a year as a result of that. The majority of it, hitting next fiscal year.
Right.
So Rossmore is without cable people to film their meetings right now. Henry Tobata is working on that, and it is unresolved right this second today about whether those meetings will be shown on LATV.
I see. Okay.
We just had a cable commission meeting last week, Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is one of the issues that the commission talked about. But with regard to budget,
Right.
the 1/3 of LATV's budget is now gone.
But we most likely will be trying to negotiate with Orange County over this, or with Time Warner, or
We don't negotiate with Orange County.
Okay.
We don't negotiate with Time Warner. We can negotiate with Rossmore
okay.
because,
Oh, and then it would be up to them to negotiate with the county.
yes.
Right. Yeah. Okay. All right. So possibly, if they really want them on Channel 3, I would think it would behoove them to do that. Okay. Well, I'm going to go back to my looking that we have a small reserve or overage here. I'm just going to keep pounding away at at least 2 new bus shelters, hoping that we can look at having those installed. The one primarily on Catella in front of the hospital. I've spoken about this a couple of times before, and the other one on Catella at Saratoga. I think the one at the hospital, right now, at both of those, there's just a bench. There's not a shelter. And I think it's self-explanatory why we would need one with a shelter in front of the hospital. Not that everyone that comes to the hospital is ill, but I think it just should have a sheltered a bus stop there, bus shelter there. But the one at Saratoga and Catella, we have a number, and I'll just reiterate this, a number of challenged workers that come from the base every day during the week. They get off in the morning on the other side of Catella and walk to the base to work, and then they come home and they go to that bus stop. During the summer, it's hot. During the winter, sometimes it's raining, and it's just a bench. And I think that we really need to have a sheltered, a covered, sheltered type bus stop there. And I know that it was an absolute, the last time we went through bus shelters was several years ago, and it was a nightmare. Years ago, evidently, there were different companies out there that would pay you to have the bus shelters, and then that went away. And so it came on the general fund, and we did get a little help, I think, from OCTA. But just read recently that some cities now are, there's some other companies that are actually funding that again, and where some other cities are going out to bid for the bus shelters. So possibly we could look into that. And I know that there are other places on Los Alamitos Boulevard and Catella where we don't have a sheltered bus stop, because the cost of them the last time was really great, and so they really reduced the places where they were. So if we could, kind of do a little bit of a study and see where else they might be, but those two places I really, really feel we need to look at seriously, seeing if we can't get something in within this next year.
Our plan was to, or is to, research the costs, research all the angles with these bus shelters, make it part of the budget process.
Okay, great.
So that will be then presented to the council, late in the spring.
Okay. All right.
And then presented for consideration.
Okay, very good. Okay, but right now I'm done.
Okay, great. Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So on to the TV fund, as Mayor Pro Tem Poe had asked about. So we're projecting on, I just numbered them, your slide number 29, 2,800 below budget because of the loss of the RCSD meetings. But wouldn't the cost also go away?
We're not responsible for any of the costs right now. It is just if you we basically have a deal inside their agreement, and the agreement is between the County of Orange and Time Warner, the County of Orange governing Rossmore and Time Warner. That agreement is expiring. So inside this agreement, there is a little clause that says the $1,400 a month or so comes to the city of Los Angeles. I mean, Los Alamitos.
Giving our
Good
money.
grief. So the revenue is going away because the Rossmore is not, I understand, and I have been told by the county that the county is not going to have a new agreement with Time Warner covering Rossmore.
But then, okay, so income aside, would not also the expense go away? Whatever.
We don't have any expense. We are not filming the meetings. Time Warner is filming those meetings.
Okay.
So we only realize revenue.
Okay.
We don't have any expenditures.
Answers my question. So there is no cost that would also be a offset. So it's found money. Okay, I got it. On to page 6 of the slide on the 2010-2011 recap. The two red, there's the red line and the blue line. The trending lines. Do we see that going down, continuing as far as expenditures, or are we going to bottom out and keep going right there? So it's kind of a nice line, the red line, but there's going to be some bottom, right?
Right, and actually this year is a little bit higher than last year.
So we'll see an uptick on that one. So.
Yes,
okay.
and so this year they meet closer together with only a $25,000
okay,
surplus.
so that's 25,000. Okay, got that. And then on slide 13, on the property tax, now this one also is kind of a trend, and kind of intuitively I would sense that line's still going to continue to decline as property values start to get adjusted, and property taxes presumably as well, right? So that 1% we get back.
According to the county, they're projecting flat growth in that category at this time.
Okay, so that 2,884 would be.
It's the current year decline due to the reassessments in the commercial area. However, from here forward, they're projecting it to remain flat.
So that next year we look at this, it might be a flat line then.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. And I think that was it. The other question Councilmember Stevens had asked about FIOS. So with that, back to you, Mayor.
Great. Thank you. Sure. Yeah, please.
Thank you. I know you like to go last, so I just.
Thank you.
So let me just clarify. I think Warren asked the question. Without the $1.2 million surplus on the fiscal year 2010-2011, without that extra infusion of one-time money, we're on target to be still $25,000 up next year without the extra money.
Exactly.
Okay, I wanted to verify that. Thank you. On the on the property tax, I know Councilmember Kuzmoto addressed it. Do we, even though the county is projecting flat growth, what kind of, if people started to reassess their houses, let's just say, and the property tax went down, would it be significant, or would it just be a minimal amount that we would be facing if that were to happen?
Actually, residential values went up this year.
Okay.
It's the commercial reassessments that brought us down.
Okay.
So it's hard to project. Basically, that's what the county is saying, is you see increases in one area and then you'll see decreases.
in the other. Okay.
So it's really unprecedented and it's hard for them to project. So at this time, it's going to be flat.
Sure. Just double checking, asking
Yeah,
all the
yeah,
questions. On page 8, for the utilities user tax, the UUT, in the presentation you said gas is down, fees are down, and water obviously is up. We know about that. How much are we down on the gas percentage? Do you have a rough estimate? I'm not looking for an exact number. You don't know.
do that.
Okay.
I don't have
We'll,
it on
we'll
me.
touch base after. And then the water, any idea of how much that's up? Is it about 25 to 30%? We can check later. That's fine.
Yeah. Overall, the category is flat, is as budgeted.
Sure. I'm just trying to get a
But,
feel
right.
for how each thing is doing individually, and we can look into that afterwards. Same with the cable and the water. I know you say the cable and the water are both up in cost, correct? So is that
Right,
correct?
cable
So our
franchise
fees are up.
yes. It's not the variance there is with FiOS coming in. We've seen an increase in Verizon receipts
With
with
FiOS.
cable, yes.
Okay, great. And do we still get $1 per person for the Verizon contract? Is that right?
It's a percentage.
Each hookup
On Verizon,
For each
and
individual.
Time Warner.
yeah.
Okay, well, we could.
That part
I haven't looked into the Verizon franchise contract since I've
Sure.
have this job, but I have looked into the Time Warner, and the Time Warner is $1 per subscriber.
Okay. I think, if I remember correctly, so is Verizon. So I just wanted to verify that we still had that, because I know they had talked about potentially addressing that and maybe changing it. So, and on page 10, you may not have this, and I'm sorry to ask for particulars. You talked about bail bond forfeitures. Was that just a one-time forfeiture, or are we seeing a trend?
It was a one-time. We saw an increase in one particular month last year.
Just one person?
Right.
Okay. And any idea what that amount was?
Not the exact amount. It's
We can-
buried into the monthly receipt.
Sure, okay.
Right.
Can you give me the percentage of LACC? Was it
0.36.
0.36?
Yes.
0.36, that's what I thought. Okay, and I'd like to say that I think that we need to address this again. I know we've looked over it before, but I think that we could potentially put some money in another account that might yield us a little bit more money. It keeps decreasing and decreasing. I don't think we've seen an increase in LACC in the last few years that I can recall. So I'd like for us to maybe, when we address the budget, we can look into alternatives for that. I know we've done it before, but maybe it's time to do it because we're not making any money with LACC, it seems. And then with the police officer's car, I know we're looking to get it early, and I probably should know this, but I don't. How early are we addressing this?
We'd like to get it upon approval within the next month. if
I'm sorry, and
possible.
how old is it?
It's a 6-year-old vehicle.
It's 6 years old already?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I think
Okay.
it was a 2004, wasn't it?
It's a 2004.
2004, okay.
There you go,
So
12
that's actually longer than we normally go, isn't it? About 4 to 5 years?
Right.
Okay.
My understanding is we delayed it.
Oh, we delayed it, okay. And then items that I'd like to ask that the council consider for the next budget process is any safety issues at the parks. I know we were lucky enough to be able to replace the fence at Orville Lewis, which I believe the people who live there and visit that park are extremely grateful. It protects them from the intrudence of the coyotes, but also we did some work on the basketball court. Wasn't that right, Tony? Repaved it? Okay. So if we have any safety issues at the parks, I'd like to ask that we look into those and maybe address those moving forward. And also consider setting aside money for speed bumps for the alleys. And I'd like to be specific in that, in the larger speed bumps, not the smaller ones, and see if there's any money in the budget for that. Those are both safety issues, and I think that those are things that we need to make sure for our community that we're doing the best job we can. And then if I could ask Tony, you don't have to get up. There's a vehicle that we've talked about for the last few years that we've deferred. I believe it was a truck. You guys were nice enough to put it off. Is that on this list? And if so, can you differentiate for me which one it is?
One of these trucks that we've been deferring is going to be coming to you guys in the next month or so.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe 27, 66 grant funds to replace it with a grant funded truck. They're both not pushing the yellow.
Right. Well, I was just wondering, is that the vehicle that for the last few years you've been trying to get and we've had to defer it?
There's been a couple of those vehicles.
That's kind of what I'm interested in. If you could tell me, you don't have to do it right now. I'd just like for us to make sure that we address those because Public Works has deferred vehicles for the last few years. Since I've come on the council, it's been 5 years. I'd like to make sure that if it's within our budget that we make sure that they have sound cars that can be safe for them but also get the work for the city done. And with that, I'll go ahead and pass it back to you, Mayor.
Great, thank you. Ken, did you have any?
Just one more.
Sure.
On page 15, we indicated that we're going to be completing 50% of the residential street improvement projects this year and carrying over $185,000 balance. Is that just a normal thing, or is that something that could be completed this year too?
Well, typically this type of projects start in the summer, and so it won't all be done before the end of June is what we're saying. So the project will get started, it'll be bid, it'll be on its way. However, the remaining of the funding will need to be carried over to complete the project at the beginning of fiscal year 12-13.
Which would be this summer.
Yes.
All right, good. And what area is that in, by the way? Is it any one specific area, or is it spread out?
It's multiple areas throughout the city.
All residential, though?
Yeah, we package them together. We talk about 4-in-1, 5-in-1. It's
Right.
one of the 5-in-1s.
Good. All right. Thank you. That was it.
Okay, great. Anybody have any second? So a couple comments. So I think that health of the city surplus 7.5 is really good. And I want to bring that up because there's an item on the agenda on the regular meeting tonight where we're going to talk about going through and looking at some creative ways to start to try to stimulate the economy and help the businesses in the residential. And we're going to talk about it in the context of that $7.5 million. So I just want to kind of keep that out there. It's interesting is that, we're going to end with a $25,000 surplus, but the reality is that we would actually be at a $200,000 surplus if we added in, or near $200,000 if we added in the general plan fees that we'd already talked about, that we were going to actually do that as a part of the surplus. We were going to start drawing down. Something that I'm very interested in up here is that in some of the discussions I had with staff, there was an example given to me for in the technology fund. So if you look at the technology fund, there's normal operation costs if you kind of go a couple layers lower than what she's showing you, and then there's the amount that they kind of put aside for projects within technology fund. So within the city, for example, there could be something out there, some projects that I've heard of, like the telephone system. I think that we're getting off this kind of Greek austerity plan, and we need to start putting money back in to start fixing some of the things on the inside. And I think that, this fund specifically, when I look at the operating costs, you can almost kind of draw a line and say how much should be in that fund, how much base to cover operations and maintenance, and how much is really investment. So I'm interested in the telephone system. Could you give us a little bit of an idea, either Angie, what type of project is in that technology fund that we may have been neglecting at this point?
Well, I'll start out, and then I want to pass it over to Cassie. I think there is a list of things right there, but also added to that list is the could be the update of a new website. things that represent our city to the public. And we have talked about the telephone system for as long as I've been here, which hasn't been 25 years or anything, but it has been a long time. And so that is, I don't know the price tag for that, but obviously, I view it as like the upgrade of the new financial system. It's a bigger than just something that we could absorb. So Cassie, you certainly always have a long list going, and so what's on the top of your tongue, technology-wise?
Okay, a couple of the projects that we have coming up that haven't actually been scheduled to date would be, for example, the telephone system. Right now, a lot of the wires that we have are so old and deteriorated that we lose connections. We have the phone company come back out and they kind of piece them together, but they're to a point where pretty soon they won't be able to piece anything together any longer. Our system is actually at the end of life. So there aren't replacement parts available. They'll probably, have to pull pieces off of things to fix it if it goes down. So we've been talking about using this fund and putting it in the capital improvement plan and letting the council decide at what time we want to start moving forward with that plan. You're looking at a couple of things that have to be done with that. One would be rewiring the city, because the wiring is still the original wiring, which is so old. Some of it's been chewed through, walked over, chairs have been rolled over it, because a lot of it just runs underneath the carpeting. So the plan would be to rewire that and probably go to some kind of, VoIP and tie it all into the computers, which would then allow us to save some money on our phone costs down, long term. So although there would be an initial investment, we'd eventually be able to save some money. Some of the other things that you see there coming up are just on the radar to begin with, but the full potential of these we don't really know yet. That's part of the plan, is to get with our IT people and have this committee come up with a long-term strategic plan on where we want to go. Obviously, we don't know where we'll be 4 years from now. Technology is changing so fast. But if we can kind of start throwing things out on a list and following what the benefits would be to the city to implement some of these things, that's kind of the direction we're going. 800 megahertz, that's going to be at end of life in a couple of years. And I don't know if you remember back, that was such a huge project when we started that. But now we're getting to a point where we're going to have to start funding the replacement of that. And it's going to be expensive. Probably we won't actually be putting money out into that, where we're actually paying the county for that for about 4 or 5 years. But it's coming, and we need to start putting money in our bank account so that we can pay for that when we get to that point. The digital evidence, we're really behind the times in that, and the only reason we haven't implemented something along those lines is just because we haven't been able to afford it. So our IT company is working with us and trying to help us shop the very best product we can find that will meet the needs that we need for the police department, so that our evidence will hold up in court. We have our routine things like computer replacement. We already take our computers long past what most businesses use in terms of replacement for computers. Things like this, we're asking each of the departments to kind of look at the way they're doing business so that we can strategize how we can do things better, maybe save on some of the redundancy that departments have, because some of our processes, particularly like with finance, it's entered in one department, then it's entered in a whole new system in another department, where we're wasting a lot of staff time doing that. It's not efficient. It increases the chance for errors. So we want to look at all of these processes, throw them in a big barrel, and then prioritize and bring all that to council so that we can do some long-term planning.
Great. So the point here is that 2008, we started restructuring the finances for the city. We've been able to get the reserve back up to 7.5. We have, the net story of this year is about about a 5% decrease in revenue for a lot of reasons and 9% decrease in cost. And that trend keeps coming down. Like Warren said, it won't continue to last forever, but we've conditioned behavior. So we get it, and we're spending to what we actually get in. I kind of want to start going a little bit of a different direction than we started in 2008 when we knew we were heading into a bad areas. I think that we can't hoard the cash and not try to invest now into things that we need within the city. It's time to start fixing the house up. And so what I'd like to be able to do is to Technology Fund was the best example I could get with Nita when going through that, really things that, you can put your hand on. Outside of here, I have a construction company, and they always want new equipment, and I make them put it on a list and order it, and so they can't just randomly say, oh, look, we're at an auction, so we can get 2 more pieces. It's like, is it on the list? So you've now every year come and kept the list going. Every department has, but I think it's time that we get into the mindset that reserve was there now to take advantage. That I think your economic outlook is exactly on. I think we're getting ready to switch gears, but we need to now fix the inside of the house. I don't mean just City Hall. I mean the city. And I just wanted to make that point before I get into specifics, because like I said, on the agenda item coming up on the economic development idea, that's the mindset that I had coming into this. I'd also say I'm not asking specifically for during this session that we're going to fix this. This is mid-year. I'm trying to telegraph what I'm hoping that the rest of the council will be supportive, and they've got great ideas too on what we end up doing at the next year's budget. The other thing about that is I would have to agree with Jerry that the LACC investment, 36,000 out there at 3.36. So really, what we're doing is we're bouncing $10 million up against a number. So if what Jerry's saying, even if you got 0.75, it'd be another 40,000. It's a half a police officer. That's kind of what I'm thinking. Maybe a little low, Chief, but I'm just figuratively thinking. But it's stuff like that. That is a low risk proposition. You can probably do that at Union Bank, let alone LACC, and I'm ready to go to the next level if the rest of the council is at a minimum starting to diversify our portfolio past LACC. LACC was great because it dipped. It took the longest to dip down. Now it's taken the longest to pull back up. We got to get ahead of that, and I think that's a $40,000 a year potential pickup, and Jerry I think was right on that. I would also be supportive of looking, the $25,000 amount that we have for reserve. This is a time where, as a council member, when you actually have some upside, you get to influence. I've got requests that come through, like Maryland saying the bus shelters. I know that we've looked at that from a CIP perspective. I think Maryland, we can kind of go up and down this, but I think there's support for that. I think it's just, are we talking about it in the mid-year, or should we actually make that a specific request in the CIPs for 2012-13 budget? Either way, I think you would find support here, and if not, somebody's going to chip in here in just a moment.
I'm just saying ASAP.
Yeah. In ASAP in city terms would be they have to do that design. So I think we're okay as long as it's going that direction.
Right.
Jerry had some other specific asks that, it's the safety at the parks. Again, I think that's updating our house. That's trying to make sure that we're following through. I mean, but again, I guess with what Jerry was saying, the fence at the park, it was intuitive. You could see we needed to do that. I get back to people want stuff all the time. Where's your list? What is the prioritized hit list? Bring that back and now start chipping away at it with us. I think at the council, especially on this year's budget. Let's not try and set the all-time investment or fund balance record right now. I think now we need to start investing. We've conditioned, and we need to go through that. 2 policy areas that I still not 100%. I tried to fight the fight last year, and I think Warren and I were going back and forth on that, which had to do with restructuring the funds, the special funds. I'm not going to reopen that, Warren, but I definitely on the garage fund. You're making adjustments, and we're kind of all good because at the end the story ends 25,000 up. But and Jerry's making the point, hey, specifically on the capital list that we've got of all the equipment, these are the things, hey, Tony, is this the one? But the reality is, again, that budget has 2 components for that fund. it allocates a pane to every department, and it says, hey, look, this is how much we're going to cost you to pay into the fund, and all departments know it and they plan for it, and then we start building up this thing, and part of it pays for the operations and maintenance, and then part of it is the fund that builds up to be able to replace these things. I've always argued how much is in that fund, what's the right amount. So I don't know if you have a slide, so you were going through that, but if we can just talk about that, and that's the only one I promise I'm going to go into on the special fund side. So, the base and preliminary step calculations, the fund balance at 742.
Yes.
So if you guys remember, this numbers went from 325 to all the way up to, even it was a little higher than that. This is the same fund that, way back before all of our times, there was money taken out to do actual improvements at City Hall. I mean, it's been used for everything, but sometimes not what it should be. So I always felt this fund was the most susceptible to be used. And I'll be honest, even if you're sitting in the council and you're struggling for budget parity and trying to balance budget, it's a place to go, well, you know what, maybe we don't need to allocate as much to that. And so it's susceptible to game playing, I think, up here too. And so I still don't get the feeling that the 742 broken up between the kind of the two drivers, operations and maintenance, and capital expenditures or potential new equipment. The methodology, we now have a list which you've provided, the garage fund fleet replacement funding plan, but does the funding plan match the balance in the fund? You know what I'm saying? So just for the public's benefit, and I'm just going to pull this thing. It's a spreadsheet. It's got 30 pieces of equipment or more, and then it goes by year, so you can kind of see every year what time expenditures should happen. And it kind of gives a approximate per year of how much we might need, right?
Right.
So could you just walk us through that just a little bit? And again, maybe if we feel that there is a policy in place for this, and I'm just not articulating it correctly, please correct me.
Sure. Okay. Basically, what we have on this worksheet, and it's a preliminary analysis of the fund. It's a preliminary plan for the fund, basically. Let's take the first vehicle on here for an example. We have a truck that was purchased in '95. It was intended to be used for 10 years. So the plan would be that within its 10-year life, each year we would set aside a tenth of the cost of that vehicle so that when it's expired, when its life is ended, at the end of the 10 years, we would have the money available in the fund for the replacement of that truck. So basically, this takes all the vehicles that the city has from their original purchase date to where we are currently and maps out how much we should have on hand in that fund for replacement of the current fleet.
So using that rationale, if you just drew up through 2011 and you see that there's a 71,000 accumulated value across all the vehicles using that, but obviously that's just the chunk for this year that would be, let's say 12. I'll go to 12. You have 40,000. 367. So that would be the amount that would be put into the service fund. So just to kind of say, okay, so 40,000, the operations and maintenance a year is how much? Because that's pretty predictable amount of the 742.
The operations and maintenance is not included in the 742.
What is the amount that we pay for the folks that maintain the operations? Because I remember a number that was somewhere near 200,000 or 300,000.
Okay. The operating budget for current year is $145,000.
Okay.
In maintenance and operations, and an additional 83 in staff. So that's 200 and
that's where I remember seeing the
Yeah.
number. So and again, if I'm wrong, totally correct me because I've got a bunch of numbers in my mind. The 225 to 250 number, that number gets paid for by the amount that's in the garage fund, right, on a year basis?
No, the operations is taxed to the departments. So the operations and maintenance, the 225, let's say, is charged to each department.
Through the garage fund allocation or the tax?
Through the tax.
Yeah.
Through the
and
tax
so
of each fund, yes.
What I'm saying is, so once you take the tax out, the 742 is what's left to pay for capital equipment.
Right, which
Okay,
is...
and so if I just stop there and say 2012, we've estimated that we need at least 40,000 put into that fund. 40 is a lot less than 742. So just on 1 year, we don't have the methodology of how we come up to 742, but that is, what is that? 20 times the amount of 1 year's worth of accumulated, I'll call it depreciation.
Mm-hmm.
But so what is the method to maintain a balance, whether it should be 742, 350, 150? That's my point, is I'm just trying to get to the methodology that because then we could be overtaxing the departments and really filling up this fund, because we are just putting more and more money in that, but we just don't know how much we need.
Right, and basically what should happen is each year through the budget process, the fund should be evaluated for what that balance, based on this spreadsheet, what that balance should be,
Okay.
and readjusted to that balance.
So going with that, is 742 the evaluated value, or are we missing doing that action tonight?
Well, what staff is proposing is staff is currently working on a comprehensive policy, and when that is presented, all these figures would be finalized, and at that point, we can...
So that I treat myself consistently with the bus thing. So what we're saying is mid-year, this is where we're at, and for the next fiscal year budget, you'll have an evaluation of how to get, whether that 742 is the right number, and we'll adjust it down or save more or allocate more from the departments to fund it up to the right value.
Actually, sooner than that. We're hoping to have the policy within the next month.
So, okay, so if that's true, and we're looking at a mid-year, and you come up with some sort of value that says that thing is overfunded, which is my premise, if I haven't, transmitted that, is that, where does that extra 250,000 that I think it's overfunded by go? Where would that be? Would that be an addition? Because that would either go back to the general fund and increase the fund balance, so that therefore you would have an excess of, and I'm just saying 250, I don't know what it will be when you calculate it, but 250 plus the 25 that we've got. What happens to the money if this thing is overfunded?
If it's overfunded, that it would be at the council's discretion to move that back into the general fund.
Okay. So I'm trying to. I'll go ahead, Angie.
I get the sense that we need. Well, I just want to clarify something. The goal is $742,000. If we were to have that amount of money in our account to properly replace these cars when they become due.
That's correct.
We only have $462,000 currently, right?
Right.
So we're not
overfunded according to this calculation.
So the amount that's in the general fund, because I'm looking at the. By the way, first time I've seen this, which I love. Thank you, but I do see. How you've calculated down to 742. I just can't tell by the spreadsheet when I asked the question how much is in that fund. I thought you said 742, but it's actually 4 something.
Yes, the fund balance.
So really, what we're doing here is actually funding it more up to 742, which is the direction I wasn't wanting to go. But I don't understand why I'm doing that completely, because maybe, look, I don't care about how many cars we have. I wrote policy-wise. I just want to understand the mechanism of how we establish the fund balance. And kind of the table that you've provided is the data, but at some point we don't have to do it tonight, but maybe we do it for the next fiscal year budget. But I'd like to be able to go through and have a discussion of how that's calculated, because I'll be honest again, then this is kind of for future council members. When you want to do something a little tricky, then you say, no, I think it's overfunded, and then you go the other way and drive that 300,000 back into the general fund, and you're balanced. So I want.
But that's right.
Yeah, it's been done before, believe me.
Saying.
So what I want to be able to do is understand: is this process documented now that you've used to calculate what that fund balance should be, or is this the process that's behind this spreadsheet, or I'll call it the.
Let me answer that. This is the plan that we never had formalized.
Okay.
Tony probably had it written before and had it, you know, it was not on a spreadsheet that everyone could see. I mean, Tony gave us all this information. Anita didn't make it up. So this is, now we know what we need, but it doesn't really indicate exactly what we need because we stretch things. We buy cars, we make them run for more years than we're supposed to. So we've been able to accomplish more with less money, and we're just in the habit of doing that. Is that correct, Tony? So, but now we have this documented about if we were to have oodles of money and want to spend it through the garage fund replacing cars, this is the target. This is what we need.
And Angie,
Yeah.
I'm completely with you, but in the spreadsheet, it jumps to the conclusion of $742,867 when I'm burning an average $70,000 to $40,000 a year need. So I don't know, do I divide 742 by 70 and say that that is what the average allocation policy is? I'm just trying to get to the policy. I don't care what the number is. I don't understand the 742 in my gut intuitively. And Tony was there picking up the pieces in 8, so I know he's doing this, and we see the upside of it. But now I want to put it down into a policy so that it we can know how it's calculated, and then at that point too, I guess what are the underpinnings to this?
Well, I think a good place to start is to have staff bring the policy to council for consideration, and then we can have this discussion with, we can continue to talk about it now, but we only have the one sheet, and I'm not sure.
I'm with you. Can I ask this question then? If the real number that's in the amount now is the 462, kind of indirectly, this budget, we've actually made a more systematic increase to this fund than anything, of almost $300,000 based on the methodology that you've applied that we don't fully understand yet. I mean, it is.
Well, we're not asking for a transfer, or we're not asking for action on this.
How do you go from 462 to 742?
We're just, at this point, we're saying that the current balance is the 462. However, the recommended balance based on this calculation would be the 742. However, until we bring forward the comprehensive policy for your review, we're not asking for any action on the item, basically.
Okay, let me ask you this, and I'm not suggesting this, this is just my opinion, but if we just said, hey, I want you to leave it at 442 until I understand the methodology, would we finish with a fund balance of about 300,000 plus the 25? So we would actually have ended up with a mid-year projection of 325, pending that we may have a methodology change that further funds the garage fund. Would that be an accurate statement?
Where does the 300,000 come from?
By not utilizing the methodology to take the savings for the garage fund from 462 to 742.
No, we're not recommending that. We've got 462 in a fund balance right now, and the 742 is basically Anita just saying that we developed this garage fund replacement funding plan because we never had one before. It's just kind of telling the council that this is what it would cost if we were to do this. We're not recommending going from taking money out of anywhere to go from 462 to 742.
Okay.
Right?
So it has no impact on the 25,000
Mayor, can I ask a question?
at this point.
Because I'm wondering if I'm understanding you correctly, because you're saying, was the 742 used in the budgetary process at all?
No.
Okay, so when we did the budget, or when you did the budget, sorry, all we used is the 462, and you're saying down the line is a wish list, but it's not included in the budget. It wouldn't increase the budget by 300,000 because we never used that as a real number in the budget.
Right, the 462 is a residual balance of the fund.
Okay.
There was no plan in place for it until we
Right, I
started
get it.
working on this.
Okay, so I guess then using this slide, since it's going to become public record too, I mean, really what you're saying then at the 742, based on what Jerry just asked you, the balance would be recommended for this fund in the next year's budget.
Yes.
So this doesn't, I misread it then because I thought this meant it's recommended, then I go to the very back and I thought we were a done deal.
Right, no.
Okay, I'm clear.
So it's like our wish list.
Exactly.
Okay. Okay.
Can I add some stuff in
Please.
it?
Now, hold on just a second, let me just.
No, I'm joking to the wish list.
I have another
Sure.
one.
Some of the items that, and again, I'm just addressing the asks that came up so they just don't kind of go away, is that, Jerry had a couple other items that she talked about, and I just want to know how they're accounted for. The safety at the parks, we talked about the speed bumps. We have talked about the speed bumps, and I know they went to the Traffic Commission. I know we've done an evaluation. The recommendation, I think, Jerry, that you're looking to do here is to continue to show council interest in speed bumps as it continues to work through the commission, that eventually will have a recommendation back to the council. Are you trying to start another item here at the budget session?
Well, what I'd like to do is, if we have money that we can set aside for public safety issues such as those, and I'm sorry, Mayor, I forgot to add into there graffiti, and maybe some people don't think graffiti is a safety issue, but when you start to see that throughout your town, it sends the wrong message and it can draw the wrong people. And not that the chief has ever said this to me, but I know from things that I've studied myself, it can be a bad thing for the community safety-wise. So I really am just saying, if we can create a line item in one of the funds that would be appropriate, that we could budget money for that, should we have it, I'd like to see that be.
In my response to you is, I don't think that by that request, because it was kind of a soft lob, that actually anything will happen. So I'm trying to get more specific to see if you're serious about it. It's probably going to happen with the item in the Traffic Commission. If I remember right, it's still working through, and that we should send a message to the Traffic Commission that the council's asked, again, for focus. There seems to be an interest, so that we can help you, Jerry, do something there.
Yeah,
It's real.
I appreciate any support the council would give, because I know that the Traffic Commission is addressing it, but there's a difference between hearing the information and living what's happening. And I live in the apartments, and as I said at the last meeting, I was coming from one neighbor's through the alley to my home, and literally was almost run down by a speeding car. I feel that while the test that they did to see if the cars were slowing down for the speed bumps to some degree showed them that there was a slowing, I'm saying in real time, in real life, it is not an abatement for the people who are speeding down the alley and putting the kids, which is my biggest concern, at risk. Because in the apartments, there's two tiny little pocket parks that I can think of, and they don't have restrooms or anything like the conveniences beside the larger one at Cottonwood. And the kids play on the parking pads, and they play out in the backs where the alleys are. And I'm just very, very concerned that someone's going to be hurt or killed. And I know that the council's been really good at supporting us moving forward with the first experiment of speed bumps, but I want to go on the record saying they are inadequate and they do not slow the traffic. And while I appreciate everything that the Traffic Commission is doing, until you live it, you don't really know. And so, yes, I would like to especially set aside money if there's it available, or if we need to do the house improvements and take it out of the reserve. I think we need to address that issue, because the streets and the alleys are becoming far more impacted as the traffic is increasing, as the city, it's a pass-through city. You pass through Los Alamitos to get to Rossmore. You pass through Los Alamitos to get to Seal Beach. You pass through Los Alamitos to get to Cypress. There's an inordinate amount of traffic, and it's only growing. And those streets, unfortunately, because they run parallel, are starting to be used to usurp the traffic. I know Mayor Pro Tem Poe had said that she would like to see maybe one-way streets. I think that might be something that we should look at. But I think for the alleys, we really need to put something in place that's going to protect those people that live there, especially the small children.
Good. So just to be specific then, City Manager, I think that you need to see where that project is in the Traffic Commission. Make sure that the folks that are running the Traffic Commission on staff understand the priority, and that the council is looking at it financially too. And if you think that it's gone past the point of return of what Jerry just explained, we always bring the right to put it on the agenda and bring it forward and start an item at the council. But I'd like to try and intercept it if we can, and if it's still salvageable down there to what Jerry's talking about, and just let us know in the weekly, and we can decide which way we bring it up.
I'd like to let everyone know that we talked about both of these issues in our staff meeting this morning, and they are on our to-do list for future council meetings. And so you'll be hearing about it.
Okay.
We've not swept either of these issues under the rug.
Okay.
With just a special note that the speed bumps that are there now are simply inadequate. I can speed down the alley and go over those speed bumps and not have to slow at all. And one of the things, Mayor Edgar, that I'm not sure if you're aware of, when they did the study, there was only one trigger when you went past it. How can you judge how fast someone's traveling from point A to point B when there's only one, and it was right before the speed bump? It's not a true depiction of the speeds that are being traveled in that alley,
Okay.
or any of the alleys, I would imagine.
Okay. So that's noted. A couple other comments. So, Ken had made the point about the red flex, and I keep hearing about that. I think all of us have either got a ticket or our wife has and complained about it.
Or two.
Yeah, yeah. Something I'd say about the red flex. I would rather have automated traffic, monitoring and ticketing, and have our police working on real stuff than to write tickets there. I think that, and this is my view, but I think red flex is effective right up to the point it's break even, and then even then, I would say that we would start looking. The only thing I would say, Chief, that if you get to a point with red flex, they are starting to suffer what a lot of businesses would, where they're starting to have an epidemic problem with their product. I think it's ripe potentially for contract negotiation. I don't know when our next contract comes up, but on the cost side, I think it's potentially manageable. And if it's not, then I'm throwing that out there. But I support it in the current model the way it is. But I would find it hard to believe. I know LA County having all the problems they're having. In Orange County, they're actually removing. At this point, it's just like I wanted to save revenue if I was red flex. So I'll do whatever it takes because the capital expense has already been done. It's just now, it's the money machine part of it. So if that's an opportunity, and you could put it in the weekly if that's something that's out there as an opportunity. And again, I think I'm going to open it up just one last time because I think, again, what I wanted to make sure is if there's any other things that are something that you're thinking that, God, like Marilyn's example, Jerry's example, anything that we want to talk about, because this is when you get the 1-2 punch. You can kind of ask for it now and look and say we've only got 25,000, but you can look now and say, I have another shot at it at the new budget coming up. So I don't know if there's any other actions that any other council members want staff to look at between now and the next budget session. But and if not, I guess send a note on to you, Angie, and I'll just go ahead.
No, fine.
Okay.
Well, we had talked about this idea about the LACC fund in our budget, and at last year, mid-year. And I would just ask the staff to check with the sewer district, because I know, I don't know anything. I think, all right, that they moved some of the money out of LACC to Citibank because Citibank guaranteed to be a point higher than LACC. So, and I may have that totally wrong, but I know there was that kind of a discussion. So I absolutely agree. I think we need to be looking at maybe not taking everything out of LACC, but just being, smart about how to invest some money so that we can get some return. This is just ridiculous. And so that, because our charge as elected official is to do what is the best for this community. So I think we have to look at everything, safety-wise, anything that we can do to better serve this community, and certainly how the money is handled is primary. So and like the mayor said, it may be a different bank here. You know, we've got the Southline Credit Union that's been so wonderful to the community. So before we get to our budget, I think it would behoove us to have some recommendations, or at least have staff look into some other options as to savings.
Okay.
I'm very supportive of that.
Ken?
I have to agree with that. In fact, quite a few of the different organizations around have switched up and started looking to alternative sources, and those percentages are going to be coming up. So I think that's something where all of us are on base on. I don't mean to jump back into this one again, but I was just curious. On your spreadsheet, all right, believe me, the wish list I know is 742. The 40 right above it, is that the actual that we are going to end up with in the 12 budget?
In the current year, none of this is funded, only maintenance and operations.
Okay, all right. Just wanted to clarify that one. And going back to public safety, you know, and Councilmember Mejia is correct. You know, we do have a lot of speeding in the alleys. Her alley is closer to Green Street. I'm over on Howard. And so, and it's a little bit wider in some areas. And so we do have a lot of speeding in there too. And I'll be honest with you, I think the speeding went up once we finished repaving, you know, a lot of the alleys, because we did make them so smooth that people took advantage of it. So anything to slow that process down. But also taking it one step farther, I think we ought to look into the lighting that we have out there on some of those alleys, because it is extremely dark. And you do have cars speeding, but again, you know, it's one of those things. I think if it wasn't for the residential lighting, the actual lighting in the alley is very low.
Okay. Let me do this, because we're running up right against our next meeting. I think at this point, council has been clear, but Jerry wants one more comment. Real quick.
I promise.
So go ahead, Jerry.
I'd just like to ask Mayor, like Marilyn said, that we look into some of the local banks to invest in. And I know that when we addressed this initially, I talked to some of the banks in the area, and they actually have special programs which are a higher yield for municipality or government agencies. So we focus on that moving forward. I want to make sure that we don't use the garage fund to shore up shortfalls for the budget. I understand what the mayor's saying. I get it, but I just don't want to use that as a tool to make it, you know, balanced. Also, the one last question is, when we talk about technology, Cassie, the company that we went with for the new technology for the police department, do they do other things like we talked about tonight, or are those things outside their scope?
Are you referring to the IT service that we use?
Yes.
That's Scientia, and they're actually providing service for the entire city now.
Okay.
And they have a pretty wide scope of skill.
Okay, so we're maybe considering them moving forward with that item to make the improvements, or is that something that's done by the county? I know there was some talk about putting money aside for within about 5 years from now, you know.
It's the 800 megahertz.
The 800 megahertz, yes.
Yeah, they wouldn't be doing the 800 megahertz.
Okay.
We're on a county-wide system.
Okay.
And in fact, it's one of the largest radio systems in the world.
Okay.
And we have to participate in that if we're going to be a part of the Orange County Consortium.
Well, and that was kind of my question. That's not something that's in there.
No, but it is a technology project is the reason we have it identified there.
Sure. Okay, great. That's all, Mayor. Thank you.
So what I'm going to do, Angie, do you and your staff have enough direction? Because I don't think we require a motion on this. This was a kind of a receive and file. And if there's any other question, I don't know. I guess we did make a couple decisions on fund balances, so maybe we better just make a motion to be safe.
I'll make a motion to approve the budget amendments to the fiscal year 2010-11 operating and capital budget as recommended in attachment E to this report.
Great, thank you. Can I get a second?
Second.
All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, there you got it. Thank you. We're going to go ahead and close this meeting off, and I'm going to adjourn and move to the city council meeting, and we're going to take a 5-minute break. Thank you.
nothing is making sense for me and you. We're going to give a little love, have a little hope, make this world a little better. So try a little more, harder than before. Let's
Ready to go. All right. I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. Tuesday, February 21st, 2012. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Graham Mejia.
Here.
Councilmember Kusamoto.
Here.
Councilmember Stevens.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Poe.
Present?
Mayor Edgar.
Here. Okay. Couple things. What I was thinking about doing, we've got a bunch of stuff on this agenda, but we've kind of started a little bit late. So I think what we'll do is we'll go ahead and go through the Pledge of Allegiance, then go into this. We've got a closed session coming up here. Let's go ahead with the Pledge of Allegiance with Councilmember Graham Mejia. She'll lead us in that, standing for the invocation by Councilmember Poe.
Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
As we meet this evening, we ask that you give us guidance in the deliberations of the business of our city. We are ever grateful for the privilege of serving this community as their elected officials. We ask your watch over the men and women of our military as they serve to preserve our freedoms. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Alrighty. All right, next item on the agenda is closed session. First of all, I guess before we go into closed session, Sandy, do you have anything? Jerry, you had asked about closed session. Did you have any comments that you want to make?
What I'd like to ask is, since we're getting started late, is it potentially possible to move this item to the end? We also have closed session after the meeting. Is that correct?
We don't
Did I
have
look
it
at that
scheduled right now at the end. This is this for this item specifically. I think that there's an item that we need to take up that's fairly quick. So I think this piece will be handled, but I think just to kind of keep a flow, I'd like to be able to handle that, come back out, and because there's something I would like to do and at the end too.
Can you give me 5 minutes then to read this document and make sure that,
Sure.
everything that I'm doing is in the best interest of the city?
Absolutely.
Thank
So
you.
what we're going to do is we'll adjourn to closed session. We'll give you 5 minutes, and then you can join us back there.
Thank you.
And then we'll be back out for oral communication, and then we'll go from there.